Welcome to Synchronicity, a good old-fashioned solo cast this week. We've been on a roll. Patrons, by the way, just been getting loaded with content. We had a really good reading earlier in the week and then a bonus episode, which I almost turned into the full episode this week. I was like, this is pretty good. If I extend it a little longer, I have like the length for a full in my head. That's the weird thing. I have like an idea of how long a podcast should be on any given week, which is ridiculous. That really is not how things work ever in time, or especially in like levels of realization. It's not like the longer it takes you to realize something, the better it is. So the longer that you would be talking about something, somehow that would equate to the power of the message, the word of God, so to speak, right? So it's not really about that. But in my head, I'm like, well, it should be at least like 30 minutes long. It probably should be like 45 minutes. But I mean, back in 2019, 2020, I was putting out like sometimes like 4 or 5 episodes a week. I remember I had some guy write in and was like, dude, stop putting out so many episodes. It's too much. I can't listen to them all. I'm like, you don't have to. There's no rule here that says you need to listen to every episode. In fact, I mean, that's a Herculean task back then to listen. That was like an insane amount of content that I was putting out. And I think, it doesn't have to do with the amount or the length of time, obviously. A lot of this stuff has to do with resonance. When you're ready to hear it, the truth is you can hear the same thing a million times and it have no impact on you. And then that one time it makes sense. You're like, oh, I get it. So that's why we do this. That's what we're doing it for. It's fun. By the way, you may have noticed there are ads. Libsyn, my hosting provider, has been putting ads in these episodes. I gotta say, it pays pretty well. Believe it or not, this podcast is like in the top, I think 5% of downloads for all podcasts. Basically, if you get more than like 30 downloads a month, you're doing better than half of all people. So when you start getting into the tens of thousands of downloads a month, you're doing well. And for people who are looking to start podcasting, although I don't know why you would want to do that in this day and age, it is all about persistence. I started this back in 2015 and I was getting maybe like 5,000 downloads a month for 4 or 5 years. And then in 2019, 2020, things started to kind of pop, right? And I got to a different level in terms of reach and downloads and attention. So like you just have to do it. And that's why when it comes to like anything you're doing in your life, it's wise to pick something you enjoy and are passionate about, or you can see yourself doing regularly, because there are going to be times where the results aren't immediately happening, or there's kind of a drought or a valley. And working through that helps a lot if you actually care about what you're doing. And I think that's the most important thing. Like, our brains are kind of being rewired for quick success overnight. I mean, if I see another fucking video on Instagram or TikTok being like, I made $250,000 this month doing this, buy my course to figure out how, it's like, holy shit, guys. Like, I mean, what are you doing? Really? Is this now what the level we've sunk into, where we need to be talking about the hundreds of thousands of dollars we're making a month as a social flex to get people to buy your course? Where if everyone who was taking that course was making that much, that would be quite impressive, but it's not. So it's like, how do you sift through all of the bullshit, right? How do you sift through all of the kind of, we know the viral hooks and the marketing standards and tactics and strategies and funnels and all this stuff. And it's not to say that any of that is bad in and of itself. I don't want to, like, I'd been doing digital marketing and worked with, small nonprofits and large nonprofits and in the spiritual sector for over a decade. And so it's not that it's bad in and of itself. It's just when it's used to manipulate and seduce and trick, that's where it becomes this kind of weird thing. And you don't have to do that. That's the beauty of like being authentic at all times to the best of your ability, is you don't have to worry about that. You only have to worry about that if you're doing something shady or you're doing something that cuts against your morals and ethics. My morals and ethics it's a very simple rule. I speak about this with the imaginal stuff. It's the golden rule. Just do unto others as you would want done unto you. It's a very simple principle. Don't do things to other people that you wouldn't want done to you. If you follow that very simple ethical framework, you're going to be A-okay. And this world and beyond and wherever else you would go. But I understand we're in like a very weird period of time. I think confidently I will be able to say that for every episode for as long as this podcast exists. I don't see the weirdness like tamping down at any point. I think it's going to scale down in terms of novelty or ridiculousness. But it's particularly weird now because we are clearly in this shift, like this phase over from worlds to other paradigms or structures of being, right? It is not the easiest transition because one conception of how reality works is fading away. The new one hasn't quite emerged. The last episode with Jessa, we alluded to a lot of this. She did most of the talking, which was wonderful. It's so nice when someone comes on the podcast and they just talk. And you just go, yes, oh, I agree. Here's 2 sentences. Please continue. I wish every guest was like that. It's wonderful. But obviously she's the best. So not everyone can have such a, eloquent way of speaking about things. By the way, if you probably can't hear it, but I have a 2-year-old flipping out upstairs. So if I get distracted at any point, I'm just listening to that because that's what 2-year-olds do. Very adorable, very cute. I went on live stream. I went on a live thing on Instagram today and I was like, let's see how long we can go before the 2-year-old demands that I stop doing what I'm doing. It was about 5, 6, 7 minutes, which I think is pretty good. It's actually longer than I thought it would be. Anyway, so this week, here's what I want to talk about, right? It was brought up in last week's episode, and I spent the bonus episode talking about this extensively. I'm going to spend some time talking about it this episode. There's some other things I want to get to, but for the most part, I want to talk about this victim, villain, savior paradigm. This is seemingly the dominant paradigm that everyone has been playing and is still playing and still going on. This is not something that I think gets phased out completely. It is a very simplistic way of processing reality, suffering, trauma, difficulties, and it makes a lot of sense that we fall into these patterns. Now, the trick is to recognize when we're doing it or when we can recognize. Sometimes it's easier to recognize when other people are doing it, go figure. But when you're doing it yourself, if you find yourself falling into kind of a victim mindset where things are being done to you or against you, or this happens to you, or this person did that to you, or the system's doing this to you, it's very easy to get stuck there and trapped there. And once you play the role of the victim, and I do believe like a big part of incarnating here on Earth is playing as many roles as we can. We like to think of ourselves as a certain type of person. As you go through your life, you will notice you play many different roles. Sometimes you're the villain. Sometimes you are just the objective bad guy. And it's weird if you're not used to playing that role to be cast in it, but you didn't get pigeonholed. You don't have to play the same character over and over again. The trick is how do you consciously kind of take control of the narrative or choose your roles? If you think of yourself kind of like an actor, how do you write yourself apart and then direct that and produce that consciously with awareness, not being thrust into roles that you have no desire to play? If you don't want to be in the comic book movies anymore, you don't have to be forced into doing the comic book roles anymore. If you don't want to do the rom-com shit anymore, you don't have to. And you can also look at this from kind of a passive standpoint, as if you, and I've spoken about this analogy before, if you're in a movie theater, right, and you've been watching this horror movie on repeat over and over and over again, you can get up and go into a different theater. It does not have to be the same movie that you play over and over and over again. A lot of times we feel like we don't have that choice. And choice is a very deep concept. I'm still going to have my wife on here to talk about this. Her perspectives on it are both challenging and illuminating. And I don't necessarily agree with them, all of them, but choice at the end of the day, we can at least feel like we have choice, right? I don't want to get into the whole idea of predeterminism and determinism and all these kind of philosophical outlooks on existential crises and reality. It's just, we can feel like we have a choice. And so that's kind of what we do with whether we call it the imaginal techniques, the manifestations, timeline jumping, dimensional hopping, whatever term we want to use, right? That's what we're doing. We're identifying a vibrational frequency of reality and saying, hey, I would like to resonate at that frequency too. And then you identify the hallmarks of what would it be like if I were the person doing those things? What would my life look like? Who would the people I'd be hanging out with? Who would the people I'd be meeting? What's my family life look like? What would my financial situation? How would my relationship be to all these facets and factors in life? And then I think the trick is, and I do think this just comes with experience and age. I wish I had this kind of wisdom in years past, but like nothing outside of you is going to solve it. Do you know what I mean? Whatever that kind of itch you have to solve all your problems, whether you think that's money or another person or a relationship or a career or a job, it's not one thing. And it's certainly not outside of you. Now, that's not to say all of those things can't contribute to a very harmonious, positive life well lived. In fact, they all are that, right? I mean, there's gratitude is such a huge way of staying on a vibrational frequency that is sustainable and appreciated. Appreciated, it's certainly not a word, but a way you can appreciate it is gratitude. And that's by recognizing all of these amazing things that are in your life. Now, sometimes we can forget that, but it doesn't mean that it's not an active principle that kind of helps us sustain versions of reality that we like and prefer. But the trick is not to push away the suffering of your life or the world. And I think this is why a lot of people kind of gravitate towards certain aspects of a spiritual practice as they get older. When you're younger, it's not even, and when I say younger, this isn't even having to do with like age per se. It's just a mindset. There are 19, 20, 21 year olds who are far more advanced and understand kind of the games and rules of life more than people who've lived, 7, 8 decades. So it's not just an age thing. It's an awareness thing. And when we try to kind of push things away or only stay in a state of pure positivity, when objectively and even subjectively things are not feeling like that, then we start playing a weird game. Then we start playing a game of either detaching, not non-attachment, but detaching from reality, which can be effective for a certain period of time, but also comes with its own consequences. And we want to be aware that when we're playing that game, we know that we're doing it. It's so often like a lot of our troubles get into when we start playing a game habitually without awareness. And we just kind of do that pattern over and over again without kind of questioning it or thinking about it. Once you have awareness of like a self-limiting belief or a threshold guardian or just something that's getting in your way, half, if not more of the battle is already done, right? That awareness of that you're doing something that may not be serving your best interests or maybe not be serving the version of yourself that you would like to be. That's when, things get weird. And we all do this. And I want to be perfectly clear. And I think people understand this at this point. I am not a guru. I am not a teacher. I am not a master. I fuck up all the time. Part of why I continue to do this podcast is to share my egregious fuck ups and let people know that it's okay if you also fuck up. There's not like some rule that says once you get this, you will never mess up again and you will never have issues or you will never have problems. I don't know anyone who's done that in life. I know people who certainly seem to be like they're enjoying their life or they are in flow states, but everything is temporary. Everything is transient. It's how do you move along with the ups and downs of life in a way that feels graceful? That to me has kind of been a big thing I'm doing coming up and just in the past few months is really tuning to the moon cycles. I think that's like a very smart thing. If you just want like a basic life hack, pay attention to the moon cycles, right? New moon, full moon, waxing, waning. Pay attention to that. There's some really powerful dynamics in how that affects us as individuals and collectively that you can kind of latch on to that. And we know kind of the Gregorian solar calendar comes with its own kind of patriarchal weird stuff. So just tuning into kind of the feminine aspects of the lunar cycle is very powerful. You do not have to go full astrology nerd and get into every weird aspects of the lunar cycles and the moon and all of that stuff. I find the moon fascinating. I'm a Cancer. It's my ruling planet. I love the moon, but you don't have to go that deep with it, but just pay attention. When's a new moon coming up? Like, for instance, we just had a full moon in Virgo, right? You learn to set intentions for the new moon. You learn to release things during the full moon. That's when if you know anything about the I Ching, that is kind of a principle that happens when something reaches its maximum capacity. It flips to the opposite of that energy. And this is something that happens. It flips. It's like literally a tipping point where it completely becomes its reverse. And that's a nature of duality. And it's a principle we can use to our advantage as well, right? This is how we use kind of difficult, chaotic, tragic situations to kind of recognize the beauty, joy, harmony, love of life. It's why when someone goes through like a very traumatic experience and they come out okay, or they're not dead, they have sometimes a new appreciation for things. And it's not because, you have to go through that to do that, but it is just the way energy tends to work. So keep that in mind if you're going through a difficult period of your life. It will not last forever, number one. Number two, the more awareness you can shine on the reasons that something is happening, the better of an opportunity you have to actually address that in a positive and systemic way that is going to yield results. And then you can start to implement some other tools and systems that are very helpful. And, this podcast, like I haven't done a solo cast here, I don't know, a month or so. By the way, there are like these bonus episodes I've been releasing. This is not just a ploy to get you to join the Patreon, it is dope now. That's what I've been talking about. Like specifically, we're doing the law of reversibility, the no techniques, the phone techniques. It's kind of more of like the vibe of what the podcast was in 2019, 2020. I jump on here every so often just to connect and remind that you're going to be fine. It's going to be okay. You do not have to freak out when things do not turn out exactly as you expected them to. Sometimes when it comes to manifestation and imaginal techniques, we can get completely consumed with outcomes and our expectations related to outcomes. And that can be a dangerous game to play because, again, we are pretty good at using our imagination to change states and feel moods and process meta emotions. We're not awesome at specifics. Now, can you use the imaginal techniques to have very specific situations play out in reality? Absolutely. That's the law of reversibility. If an experience can summon a mood or bring about a state of consciousness or mood can bring about a physical event, right? That's a principle. You can test it. Again, with all of this stuff, like, you can test all of this stuff. None of this is to be taken from me or anyone else. Don't take anyone's word for it. Like, that is the first kind of red flag if someone is telling you that this is the way it is and you just take my word for it. You don't have to test it out. You can believe me, or God spoke directly to me and I have all of the information. That's not good. And that's disempowering. You should at this point be able to tell the difference between empowering messages that make you feel freer, more flexible. They may be scary. They may be downright terrifying new ideas that kind of open up your perspective on reality, but they're not going to make you feel like you just have to follow some system that someone else gives you. I know nothing about reality that indicates that that's the case, right? Indicates that that's the case. That's somehow an English sentence, I suppose. But, just make sure that like anything that's not making you feel lighter doesn't mean there isn't like heaviness to situations, but anything that doesn't make you feel like you have some agency over your life, I would really play around with that. I would really investigate it. It's easy to want to believe someone else has all of the answers for you. It's harder to put in the effort and work every day to achieve the things that you want to achieve. That's more difficult. It requires a consistent faith and effort and kind of diligence and discipline that really like is not being reinforced so much in the modern world, right? It's not. We're moving so quickly towards everything, right? That like just everything comes at us a million miles per hour. We barely have time to process it. If you have a family or you have bills or an obligation, I mean, you have something in your life that falls under the category of responsibility. It's hard sometimes. And I think we should acknowledge that and just allow that to be a thing that we understand is going on in reality and not kind of just pretend like it's not happening. Okay. It's a very rapidly changing landscape of the world, and you can't necessarily know exactly what to do at any given point. People don't even talk about it. It's why sometimes just speaking with someone, whether it's a friend, it's why I did the theta healing stuff and life coach, all this stuff, like just talking to someone to hear that this is not a unique experience where everyone's like, what the fuck is going on? Why is the world? It's just, we're changing. The world is changing. Whether you can blame AI if you want to, I don't know, blame crypto. By the way, crypto, it's time. There's a course, by the way, on my Stan store. I just dropped the price for the bull run special. We always put in like sirens and like cash sounds, money cash registers. Ching, ching, ching. Put those in post. You can check that out. It's a course I put together last summer, and I updated it with a live webinar that I did in February. If you just want the recent live webinar, by the way, like here's the thing with crypto, and I've spent God knows how many hours on this podcast, and some people hate it, some people love it, some people just don't give a fuck. It is one of the few places I know that you can actually see imaginal techniques related to abundance in financial form play out very quickly, good and bad. I do not mean to make it sound like it is just a positive experience. You're going to throw some money and you're going to be a millionaire overnight. No, that's not what it is. But it will teach you about your relationship with money, which I think is critically important for everyone. And it'll teach you the lessons you need to know. One thing that's for sure is you are constantly teaching yourself the lessons you need to know. Whether you choose to pay attention and take it as such is completely up to you. You can fight those lessons to your dying day and probably run the script over however many times you want, infinitely, right? If you want to. But crypto is just one of those things. Listen, here's the deal. You get about 12 to 18 months of a bull run in these cycles. There are some clear narratives that are very easy to latch onto. The last webinar, I spoke about a bunch of those. It's up on the Stan store. I think it's $7 for the recording. I'm trying to, in case you haven't noticed, I'm trying to make things as affordable. I have a range of stuff. The podcast is free. There's a version of the Patreon that's free. Then I have digital products that are between $5, $7, $10. I'm trying to accommodate everyone regardless of where they are. I do think it's important to invest in this stuff. It's why I pay for things regularly, whether it's information. And the truth is, not all of it is great. Sometimes I paid for something a month ago, some TikTok thing. And it sounded too good to be true. I jumped on the call, forked over a ton of dough, and it was too good to be true. It just wasn't, it didn't live up to its aim. And I was like, hey, guys, maybe can I get a refund? There's absolutely no refunds. I'm like, okay, I get it. Cool business model. I'm sure this will work out for a long time. It's basically scamming people for promising something that doesn't exist. But here's the truth. While I paid for that, I also continued to do my own stuff on TikTok. And then the primary channel that I've been running there has had 3 videos go to 1 million views in the past 3 weeks. So it's you learn, if you just do your thing, you will learn what you need to learn. That applies for everything in life. It's not just the TikTok and social media and crypto. This is for your life. So find something that you genuinely give a fuck about. And it doesn't have to be some lofty spiritual thing. That can be totally cool if that's where you're at. But it might also just be, you need your bills paid. You need some stability in your life. You need some connection in your life. Focus on those things. But you do need a goal. You do need a concrete kind of aim to direct your energy towards. I think that's where a lot of us tend to get stuck, is we don't have our compass set in a direction. We're just kind of groping and feeling in the dark for anything that feels like a semblance of connection or inspiration or authenticity or whatever. But there are things you care about. Don't think because there hasn't been a clear path that you've seen before that there isn't a path at all. I mean, there are people who have figured out how to express themselves authentically and genuinely in the strangest of ways. And because they believed in themselves and enjoyed what they were doing and were excited about it and had some inspiration and curiosity, that shit works. And that's really all it takes. And please remember, this is very important, really be gentle with yourself. It is very easy to be hard on yourself. It is very easy to beat yourself up regularly if you feel that you're not meeting expectations or you're comparing yourself to other people, which is generally not a good thing to do. It is very easy to get discouraged and kind of fall into a melancholic state, which is not great for manifestation. Well, it's not actually true. It's actually really good for manifestation. It's just usually not the pleasant kind. It's usually not the kind that's going to make you feel amazing, but it's still manifestation, however you want to slice it. So just be aware that, like, if you're being hard on yourself and you catch yourself being hard on yourself, give yourself a break. You're doing great. Even if you can point to all the reasons you're not doing great, I promise you're doing great. It's not easy being alive. Do you understand? It can feel easy at times, and it can feel smooth, and it can feel wonderful and delightful and amazing, but it can be really hard other times too. And it's important to acknowledge that and know that just you waking up every day and sometimes just getting through a day is a major accomplishment, especially if you have kids. If you have kids, you definitely know what I'm talking about. You're like, holy fuck. But even if you don't, it's totally cool. Just like, you can do whatever you want. Just make sure you figure out on some level, maybe not the thing you're going to do with your life, but something you could see yourself doing. And then invest in it. Invest in it with time, with energy, with money. If it doesn't have to be any one of those things, it can be a combination. It could be some. If you don't have a lot of money, put in more time and energy. If you have a lot of money, although I found throwing money at things typically is the least effective form of kind of getting things done. It's just like money doesn't compensate for experience, time, energy, persistence. It doesn't. I wish that it did, especially in periods where, like, I've had a ton of money and I just throw money at problems, but it doesn't really solve them. Like, there's nothing. It's like the analogy of, like, if you were trying to run a restaurant, like, you can hire everyone top down to run everything for you. But if you kind of like go through all of the roles from like washing the dishes to front of house to, reception, booking, all of these things, you're going to understand the ecosystem of what it takes to run a restaurant in a better way than if you just pay someone else to do all of those things. And that's kind of how we should approach our own reality creation, playing the video game, play the roles. And if you find yourself in a role that no longer suits you, or you feel like you've learned everything you can learn from it, change the role. Change the fucking role. Your thoughts and your beliefs about what your limitations are, what you're capable of doing, what your habits are, your memories, your future expectations, that's who you are as a person. That is quite literally who you are. It's inescapable. Those conceptions determine your reality and the roles that you're playing. Now, the good news is you can change those at any given time. Even if it feels like you can't, you can. It may take time. It may take weeks. It may take months. It could take years. I'm not saying that it will, but it could. But you do have the power to kind of shape your neural pathways, shape the way you kind of use your imagination, and completely radicalize who you are. I've seen this happen with myself. I've seen it happen with hundreds of other people who I've met over the years through the podcast. I've seen it happen with friends, with family members, and I've seen it happen in both directions. This is not just a principle that implies like once you get this, you are only going to use it for upwards momentum. It can absolutely take someone down too. The trick is to not freak out, right? When you're surfing those high waves and you kind of recognize that this is kind of all a game and an illusory thing that you control with your feelings and thoughts and imagination, it can get a little weird. It can get a little dicey, right? But there's no reason to be afraid. It's okay. You're doing wonderful. Anyway, all right, we hit the 30-minute threshold, right? So there we go. I hit the imaginary point of how long an episode is supposed to be. whatever the fuck that means. The Patreon, as I said, is rocking. It's patreon.com/synchronicity. I will probably put ad-free episodes there, right? I think that's going to be, of course, someone is calling now. How many spam calls are we getting, by the way? You like my Zelda ringtone? Out of control in the spam ringtones or the spam calls. It's just absolutely insane. So the Patreon is there. Coaching stuff is closed for the spring. That said, stay tuned for an announcement. There will be a group thing that I'm doing on a monthly basis. So if you missed the one-to-one coaching and you wanted that, or just like whatever, I don't even know, it's coaching, just working with me one-to-one, you missed that. The group shit should be pretty dope. And it's also going to be a lower price point. So stay tuned for that. Anything else? Crypto course, pay attention to crypto if you're so inclined. It's a decent time to get involved. You're not going to be upset if you buy something now and sell it in like a year. You're going to be like, oh shit, this is a lot higher than it was. I'm going to try to do more of those webinars, maybe a monthly thing. I'm trying both to do more and not overcommit, which has been an issue for me in the past, but I feel like I'm better at time management and kind of modulating and regulating my energy. So we're going to try to keep it up. In May, I am going to Turkey. That is going to be fun. And then I'm coming back, and then I'm going back to Turkey. This is just my life. But the episodes will continue. Everything is still going. Oh, and then a live stream. The Patreon, we have a live stream. It'll either be today or Thursday, probably Thursday. I just got so many of these calls this week. But anyway, I really appreciate all of you guys. Hey, if you can, by the way, because it does help the show, rate and review the podcast. Truthfully, I see them come in every couple months. I haven't been even saying that over the past couple of years. I totally forgot. But, you know, if you get anything out of it, that's the least. It's a very small thing you can do. It means a lot. It's the least you can do for that. No, I'm just I was going to say. That sounds wrong. But if you can, I would appreciate it. It doesn't cost anything except a couple minutes, if that. And it helps the show grow. All right, guys, that's it. Until next week, happy imagining. Bye-bye.